Good morning. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm such a long-time admirer of Shunryu Suzuki's lineage and what the community has done over the many years here for the Dharma writ large and for just plain human beings here and so far around. I am on a book tour, and actually, I've written 6 books. This is the 6th book. They've explored various aspects of the Zen life over the many years. I have arrived in my dotage. I am 76 now, and I think I'm going to provide entertainment as this speaker keeps trying to escape. I've explored the Kuoan way, meditation. I did a little history of Zen Come West. This is my pause and look back at my life, and through that a reconsideration of a spiritual life writ large, a Zen life specifically, and what it might mean for us as we live over the years, and if we're lucky, years, and where that might reveal itself. To give it a little bit of a framework, I've attached the 10 ox herding pictures of Zen renown as a little bit of a superstructure. It's always been interesting to me because it was never meant to be more than a trellis on which to grow the vine of my reflections. But from the beginning, from the publishers and the editors and everything, it's taken on its own life, and it's kind of a big part of this. If you can stay or come back for the workshop, I'll be talking mainly about that there. A number of things happened along the way here. As a side to this, I have a story, and what happened was that many years ago, when I was really just beginning, I stumbled upon a book by somebody named Simon's Roof. And he appears to have written a single book. It was called Journeys on the Razor's Edge. And it comes out of him spending 4, 5, 6 years in India in the first half of the 20th century. And then when he came back to the States, he published this book. And it was mainly anecdotes that he had culled out of the spiritual traditions of India. And there was one little tiny thing. It was maybe a paragraph, 2 paragraphs. And it captured my imagination. And I thought there was something in there that was important for me, although I wasn't quite sure what it was at that time. And I've thought about it for many years. And then some years ago, independent of writing this book, I began to do my own version of that story. And I went through numerous revisions. I've posted it on some of my social media pages over the years. Finally, it seemed, as I was coming to the end of this narrative, that is the arc of a spiritual life, I realized there was sort of a coda or even a summation of what the whole book was in that short story. And so I did the final version, forced to have the final version because it's now published. And then it is, I've had to admit to people that after I tell you the story, you won't have to buy the book. But I hope you'll consider it anyway. It's got great pictures. And I think that's enough to introduce the story. And maybe afterwards we'll have an opportunity for some conversation. We can go anywhere you want. There's an old saying about politics. You run for office with poetry, but you must govern with prose. As the spiritual way opens for us, we discover our lives must incorporate both prose and poetry. There are the ordinary tasks of life, work, relationships, maybe romantic partnerships or marriage, sometimes children. There is the ticking of the clock. It certainly feels like prose. But as we open our eyes and hearts, we discover something. Actually, it's all poetry. In fact, it turns out the universe is writing stories and songs, actually whole symphonies. And here we are, you and me. We, in fact, live and breathe and take our being within stories. Like the turtle in that old joke, it's stories all the way down. And so, to recap the song and prose and poetry, to bring it all together. Once upon a time, long ago and far away, there was a burglar. She was quick-witted and nimble-footed, and so she was successful in her chosen trade. However, as sometimes happens when one is good at something, she kept pushing the envelope. And with that came the disaster. She was discovered trying to break into a rich merchant's home. She fled without anyone catching a glimpse of her face. However, as a great cry of "thief" rang out, pretty much the whole village was soon in hot pursuit. Fortunately for her, she was just far enough ahead of the crowd that when she saw a cave opening between the road and a creek, she had time to throw herself into the water, roll in the mud, and then climb back out to the cave. There she sat, settling into a traditional meditation posture in front of the cave opening. It looked exactly as if she were simply one of the many mendicants, monastics, mad people, or others who took to the road on the great spiritual quest. When the crowd arrived in front of the cave and the convincing-looking monastic, their leader saw her and said, "Oh, Holy One, did you see the thief we were chasing?" The burglar simply ignored the question and continued sitting as if she were meditating. One of the villagers said to their leader, "Can't you see she's meditating? We could earn some very bad karma if we disturb her." And then another said, "Let's wait. When she's ready, she'll speak." There was a muttering of agreement, and the leader understood one leads by ordering people to do what they want to do. So they all, that in other contexts has been a pretty good laugh line. Let's enjoy this. So they all sat on the ground in front of the thief and waited. While the burglar sat there pretending to meditate, she desperately wondered when they would move on. Instead, more and more villagers gathered. Some remained standing, most sat down, a few even began to meditate themselves. She had this terrible feeling, as if she were trapped in the bottom of a dry well. After about 2 hours, vastly longer than the burglar ever thought she could hold still, she pretended to awaken from her meditative trance. Slowly opening her eyes, she looked out at what was now about 50 people, all of them quietly waiting. She cleared her throat and spoke softly, but with enough volume to be heard by everyone there. "Why are you looking for some poor thief, dear ones? Wouldn't it be vastly better to search for your own true nature? After all, who isn't stealing their lives by ignoring the great questions of life and death?" It's not really a dramatic pause. With this, the villagers were overcome. Some with grief at their wasted lives, others at the call to something more important than perhaps they had ever considered before. A few ran back to the village to gather flowers to give her. Others went home and got some food as an offering, including rare treats. Presented with the flowers and food, the burglar ate, trying not to gobble or look greedy. Then, asking herself what a wise person would do in a similar situation, she asked that the majority of the food be distributed among those present, specifying that the poorest get enough, and particularly some of the best delicacies. She also handed out the flowers to everyone. People felt graced. Finally, the rich merchant himself stepped forward and implored the wise nun that she remain here and grace their village with wisdom. The burglar thought to herself, well, I'm good at my trade as a thief. It is hard work, and it is too dangerous. This holy nun gig, it could be an easy way to make a living. As a thief, she thought she could easily steal what she needed just by pretending to be holy. So she said, I will stay with you, but only for a brief time. The villagers were ecstatic. They brought her blankets and candles, and someone even thought to bring her a down-filled pillow. Life was comfortable beyond what she had ever experienced. The price was that she had to pretend to meditate for hours every day, and then in the early evening to answer questions the villagers would bring to her. Answering questions turned out not to be difficult. It seems she knew what a good and generous heart would do, or as she thought it, what a sucker would do. Not a lot of difference, she was pretty sure. Pretending to meditate, however, was harder. She knew people were watching, so she really had to hold still. Life paraded by on the road. Merchants, monastics, families, and children. A small reference here to the arc of the book. Once an ox, led by a boy with a rope held in a loop through its nose, trotted by. The pair paused and looked at her. Their eyes, boy and ox, were dark pools. Then they moved on without saying anything. Time passed. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. The food was good. The blankets were warm. And oh my, that pillow. But the burglar's meditating continued to be a terrible ordeal. She experimented with her posture, trying to find a position that wasn't painful. She began to sit on the pillow and gradually became comfortable sitting cross-legged. Over time, her knees began to drop and then touch the ground. But then there was her mind. She fantasized about everything that had happened to her life. How she was raised, the poverty, the violence, the gift of learning to read at the local temple, and the reading of books. There weren't many, but she read them over and over. Then there was her trade, figuring out how to steal without getting caught, experiencing what happened early on when she was caught. The moments of joy and the long times of boredom and the intermittent flashes of terror. She also fantasized about the future, about what new treats the villagers might bring, about what she would do when she tired of this and returned to the road and a life of burglaries. But as she passed in her imagination from the past to the future, increasingly she noticed something else. At first, it was like a flashing silence, just for a moment. Gradually, it grew larger in her consciousness. After a while, as those weeks passed into those months, that space, that quiet, that just being present became a large part of her holding still, pretending to meditate. Something was now different. She began seeing the villagers in a new light. And even the words that came out of her mouth now landed in her own ears in a new way. She gradually came to know the villagers, their sorrows, how they could be so petty and even sometimes cruel, the various intrigues of their lives, their loves as they arose and sometimes fell apart, other times deepened, their many generosities, sometimes unconscious, sometimes grand and even costly. Gradually, she began to love them. And increasingly self-aware, she began to see how her own life was just like theirs. She knew they were different, and yet somehow, mysteriously, they all were also one. Increasingly, as she spoke, everything she shared was based in that mystery, that they were different and that they were more closely connected than the finest woven fabric. Then the teenager appeared. He approached her one evening, made bows, and said he had been wandering looking for a teacher. And he had began to hear of this amazing nun who spoke wisely and, more importantly, modeled the great gift of silent meditation. He declared he wanted to learn her wisdom. Not knowing what to do, she simply ignored him. He took a place in the dirt below her as she began to pretend to meditate. He sat quietly. The next day, she told him, go. She wasn't interested in having disciples. But he continued to sit with her at a respectful distance. She knew she had to pretend to be generous, so she made sure he was fed. And before long, the villagers made sure he had blankets and even a pillow of his own. He seemed much less interested in them than she was. What he seemed to love was to sit quietly. She asked him, what are you doing while meditating? He said he did what he was taught when he first decided to walk the spiritual path. He counted his breath, putting a 1 on his inhalation, then exhaled, and then put a 2 on the next inhalation, and continuing until 10, after which he repeated the process. She said nothing. Then she tried it for herself and discovered it helped with her concentration. But it also tended to obscure the quiet place that seemed increasingly interesting to her. So a few days later, she told him that he might try just sitting quietly, not trying to think, not trying to not think. And he did. She began to wonder if it was time to escape. The problem was that there were villagers around pretty much all the time. And the boy, well, he was there all the time. So, the burglar was stuck. Over time, the burglar grew quieter. She witnessed the day as it began. She witnessed the day as it passed. She witnessed the evening as it arose. Her last moment before sleep was noticing, witnessing, being present. And her words almost always came from that place, the place where she saw she and they were all the same. Increasingly, she talked about the silence, about what she found and what they might find. One day, the boy came to her and said that when he took a walk down by the creek, a crow called out. And in that moment, he realized the crow, the creek, the trees. He himself and all things were joined so closely that the right word for what was true and present was simply one. And then he added, embarrassed, how he knew even that one seemed a bit too much. She wasn't sure what to say, so she simply smiled at him, put her hands together, and made a small bow. They continued together in this way as the months turned into years. She wasn't sure when it happened for herself. In fact, she never had that big thing like her disciple. What she did have was a gradual growing into peace and joy and gratitude for it all. In that parade of humanity, at some point another ox trotted by, this time without an attendant. It ignored her and just continued on its way. The image of it swishing its tail as it trotted down the road stuck in her heart. Eventually, her fame as a wise counselor and teacher of the ways of the heart spread across the country. She was attended to faithfully by her disciple, who was increasingly seen as a wise teacher himself. A small community of monks and nuns gathered around her, and within the village, others seemed to become wise as well. One year, she fell ill, but that seemed okay. Her disciples tended to her, and that was okay. The villagers came to ask her last questions, and that was okay. The world, terrible as it was also something wonderful, something amazing. And when she died, her senior disciple, now a wise and respected counselor, oversaw the burning of her corpse. He installed her ashes under some rocks out beyond the small monastery of nuns and monks that had grown over the years. The community elected him to succeed their founding teacher. Always, before he lectured on the mysteries of the way, he would thank the good gods that he had been given such a wonderful guide on the mysteries of life and death. The teacher who stole his delusions. And in doing so, opened his heart. Mystery piled upon mystery. The intimate way. I've been told this is a good time to stretch.
Q&A then?
Oh, I would love it. While we're setting that up, I just want to mention the pictures. I've always been told that a book without pictures is like a kiss without a hug, but I've never had anything except cover, some nice cover art. But this is the first time I had the opportunity to have interior illustrations, and they used my dear friend Segako Amato, who some of you may know for the Illustrated Guide to Zen, a kind of a wonderful little book about Zen practice in the Soto tradition as it would be practiced in the West, a little bit of a hybrid. Great book from Wisdom Publications, if you haven't done it. The only other thing I want to say, that my one regret out of this, they're kind of wonderful. It's the 10 Oxfording pictures. I envisioned that the figure, which is traditionally a boy, be a girl. And I didn't think that was such a big thing. And I managed to convince Seigaku, who is very conservative, that if he might use his daughter aged up slightly as the little girl, and that suckered him right into it. Yeah. And he had these three concept pictures, where she's a little tomboy with a striped T-shirt and a slingshot, and I thought, this is going to go. And Shambhala, which I think of as, they're very good. They published me, but I think of them as a little bit adventuresome and such. But they said no. And then my one regret was that I didn't, push a little bit harder. But maybe someday Seigaku will expand those out and make a monograph or something. That's the only thing I had to say.
I was going to say, before we start the Q&A, do you want to talk a few moments about your workshop today, if people want to join?
The workshop today, sure. So it's kind of aimed. It's pulled out of the book, which is again the reflection on the arc of the spiritual life. But the ordained are welcome to come, and there will be things appropriate for you all. But it's really made for real people. So. I hope you would be interested in the possibilities of reflection, the arc of the spiritual life, with householder practice at the center of it. That's kind of my goal.
And that's this afternoon, 2:30? 2:30 to 4:30 in the conference center. And you're welcome to join there and register there. If you have a question, please raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone over to you.
Thank you so much for that story. I was wondering what lessons you think we could take from the burglar.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, because that has been, as I mentioned, this was a parallel part of my life, accompanying me literally from my late teens, and how it popped out for me was in the original version, it's just the bare bones of a thief forced to pretend they're spiritual and finding their heart awakened. For me, what I discovered in that was, I guess that was me. And I suspect that many of us may find, in our culture, the sense of not being good enough or being authentic, imposter syndrome, and all of that kind of cuts through our communities, except for the odd sociopath, as simply how we see the world. And I think it's important for us to realize that however we approach the interior life, however we approach the really important thing, the fundamental matter, this question of life and death, why does it hurt? We do it in no other place and from no other body than ours. And it's that person who maybe doesn't feel quite up to it or feels not quite authentic. That place is the gate. Is that helpful?
Another question? We have one online.
This question comes from our online Sangha. This is Griffin, who asks, can you say more about the patience for the gradual path where the terrible world, aging, and illness are okay?
So, I'm sorry, I missed a pivot word in that question just before the terrible things.
Can you say more about patience on the gradual path where the terrible world is okay?
Thank you, patience. When I learn that one, I'll tell you. And there we are. Human beings, we're not patient creatures as a general rule. For me, quiet and silence is a learned behavior. Even today, I twitch. After 50 years, more than 50 years of practice, I twitch. I would like to be the quiet person in the room. I have on occasion fantasized about being the quiet person in the room. Fortunately, what I learned is I don't have to be somebody else. I don't have to be that person. If I allow, Dogen told us the secret, the whole thing of how we actually meet the world is in his Genjo Kuoan. And it's that line about when if we advance to the 10,000 things, to the world itself, that's the mistake. If we allow the 10,000 things to come to us, that's awakening. And when we unpack it, I think, back to our lives and meeting them in all their urgency and need. There are things we have to do. There are people that have to be cared for. There are things that have to be done. Life has to be lived. And sometimes it can feel like we're it gets in the way. It's in the way. In fact, there's traditions that suggest it's in the way. And in fact, it's the universe calling to us, inviting us, pulling us into the deep and the true at all times. So I would say what I thought was the meta message in that was, how do we meet the deep and the true in our ordinary lives? And I think the point is, if I understood the question correctly, this is it. Like the Gahan Wilson cartoon, the old monk and the young monk, and the caption is, there is no next thing. This is it. This is it.
First, I want to thank you. I thought that was a great story, well told. I love a good story. I have two questions for you. I assume you made the thief a woman and not a man. I assume when you heard the bare bones of the story that the thief was a man, so I'd be curious about that. And if that is the case, why? And secondly, what is the meaning of that second cow swishing by?
Yeah. Thank you. It seemed right. It just seemed right. She became a she very early on in my earlier version. Actually, just as a thing for you all, I've been on my tour I'm giving it kind of 2 months, and I have two identities. I'm a very long time Zen person. I also spent 25 years as a Unitarian Universalist minister. That was kind of my day job for a very long time, and have deep and happy connections with them. So the first month was UU World, and this second month is Zen World. So last week I was at the Zen Mountain Monastery and the Zen Great Vow Zen Monastery in Claskenai, and then their Heart of Wisdom Temple in Portland. I'm here. Then I'm going to talk at ZCLA, and then I get to visit a little Rinzai temple, which is going to be kind of fun. In that, up until in all the UU things, and I didn't do this story. I did this story in all the UU venues, and then I didn't do it at Great Vow Monastery because last year I was given I was invited to be the speaker for their Sunday program as well. But there I did the final version of this before it was actually published. And it's now, I'm afraid, on so many YouTubes and videos that I will be retiring it as the story I'm sharing. So if you're at any of the other, if you're at CCLA, don't worry. I won't do it again. But I'm kind of sad, and because I love this story. And part of why the delivery is practiced. So there's that. The gendered, I hope, whatever the mystery of the human heart is, that seemed the right thing. And the ox. So in the 10 ox herding pictures, the narrative is that it's the seeker discovering the mind or the heart and our true nature, and the ox is always that. And part of what the real power for me as a Zen person is that we do not go to the emptiness or the place. We continue on. And if you want to know more about that, I believe there will be a conversation at 2:30. But as far as the ox is concerned, it's glimpsed, it's encountered, it's enticed, it's trapped, it's dealt with, it's mastered in a way, it's certainly being ridden, and then it disappears. And for the last three of the pictures. What I'm trying to, sketch with whatever that was, 7 or 8 words in that, was that at that moment for the burglar in the arc of her spiritual life, she was letting it go. She had met it. They had found each other. She had learned the way, and the next steps were simply moving into the undifferentiated manifestation of who we are. Is that, I hope, and I hope it kind of opened into that. Although for us, without the book before that, it's a little bit of a non sequitur, which is why I kind of tried to give you a heads up. Is that an answer?
Another question?
There seem to be some online. I think I'm looking at you online there. Is that correct?
That's one of our several cameras. But that's a perfectly good one to address the online
Usually
folks
all I
with.
have is this little one right there. Not high tech.
So this question comes from Seishin. Why did the thief nun appear to not suffer any consequences from her past behavior other than some estrangement from meditating or quietude?
Oh, because it's a short story, not real life. Awakening does not, if you haven't heard, awakening will not release you from the consequences of your behaviors. If you want to unpack that as a spiritual text, the second case in the Gateless Gate, commonly called the Fox Kuoan, will disabuse you of that. I don't know if we have time to play with that, but I could.
You could. Go ahead.
Cool. Oh boy. So the story is it's by Zhang, right? I always get I want to make sure I have my persons right. Let me just make sure I'm doing I once gave a version of this talk extemporaneously the entire way through, and then I had the wrong eminent monk in it, and I have never ceased hearing the end of that. Fox Kuoan, Chang. I'm going to go with. Oh, there is no internet. All right. Well, I can stand a little more humiliation. So Bai Zhang is the abbot of Bai Zhang. Yeah, it is Bai Zhang, right? Yeah, okay. Which is, how the tradition in China was that an eminent monastic, an abbot, might be named, is actually takes on the name of the mountain nearby where the monastery is. So he was in the habit of giving a talk, public talk every week, let's say Sunday morning. And the people from the village and everything would come, as well as the monastics. And at some point, he began to notice there was somebody in the back of the hall, always an old guy, kind of raggedy and distinctive in some way that he couldn't quite put his finger on. Finally, one day, the guy hangs back, when everybody else goes off to the coffee hour, and Bai Zhang says, "What are you?" And the old man says, "Oh, you picked it up, huh? Yeah, I'm not a human. In fact, I was the abbot on this monastery, 4 or 5 millennia ago, when a student of the way came to me and said, is a person who has realized the way bound by the laws of cause and effect or not?" I said, "Such a person is not. I have been reincarnating as a ghost, a fox spirit," which is in East Asian culture is not, sometimes it's a trickster, usually it's something bad. It's just a bad thing. 500 times now. I'm tired of it. I'm sick of it. So, can you please put my mind to rest? And Bai Zhang says, "Sure." And so he does the formal bows. He makes the request. He says, "Sir, is a person who has achieved the way bound by the law of cause and effect or not?" Now, I don't know the actual original Chinese, but I can tell you that there are variant translations of his response. The person who has achieved the way is at one with. The student of the way does not evade. There's always a pointing to intimacy, that what we do and who we are and our awakening are not 3 things. And the fox spirit ghost old guy says, "Oh, thank goodness. I am now released from the bounds of cause and effect, or of the consequences of this specific ill act." And then he asks for a small favor. He says, "My corpse is around the mountain. Can you give me a funeral as a monastic?" And Bai Zhang says, "Sure." And and then he has the monks, the head monk announce that after the afternoon meal, they're going to go out and have a funeral for a monastic. And everybody's a little confused because there's no corpse. And so it's over, they go and they trot around, and he takes his staff, he pokes around, he finds the body, they go back, they have the funeral. That evening, Wang Bo, and I do have that name right, Wang Bo has been out shopping or something, and he tells him about, actually in formal conversation with the gang about this story, and Wang Bo says, "Sir, what if the old abbot gave the right answer each time? What then?" And then, because this is a Zen story and not a parable, with a fairly clear moral, which we can up to this point say, don't, your karma is going to go along with you no matter how enlightened you are. We get a new question. What if he gave the right answer every time? And Bai Jiang says, "Come here and I'll tell you." And that's dangerous territory, especially if the Zen teacher has a stick. And then the thing here is that Bai Jiang, by legend, in addition to being an eloquent speaker, is apparently short of stature. Wang Bo is, by all accounts, a giant. In fact, he may have been a bandit chief at one point. So there's our burglar, kind of cool, and is now the senior disciple of Bai Jiang. So, little person with a stick, big guy. Come here. And so as he approaches Wang Bo, just outside of the furthest reach of Bai Jiang, reaches over and slaps his teacher. Everything goes silent. Not a good move, generally speaking. But Bai Jiang begins to laugh. And he laughs and he laughs and laughs. And he says, "I thought there was a red-bearded barbarian, but here's a red-bearded barbarian." That's not oblique. That's a reference to Bodhidharma, the sometimes historical founder of Zen in China. So to unpack that a little bit, the first part tells us that, the burglar has karma, and it was a short story. If it were a novel, there would be some hell to pay. True for all of us, who we are, where we are, what we do, is what we are, And we're invited into some mysterious territory here, some liminal space. I'm fascinated with the three bodies of the Buddha, the Dharmakaya, the Nirmanakaya, the Sambhogakaya. The first two are kind of like pretty straightforward. The Dharmakaya is the emptiness body. This is where everything falls away, where there are no categories, where there is no high or low or cause and effect. It's just without any essences, just open, just wildly boundless. Nirmanakaya is the realm of history, phenomena, where there definitely is karma, where there is high and low, and what we do matters. It's where genetics and wars and ants and stars all live. So traditionally, Sambhogakaya is kind of treated as the miraculous realms, where telepathy and bilocation and various violations of the laws of physics as we understand them occur. I've never found that part particularly interesting, that kind of gross description of it. But what I have realized over the years in the arc of my life, my spiritual life, is that form is emptiness and emptiness is form. Absolutely true. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Dharmakaya is Nirmanakaya, Nirmanakaya is Dharmakaya. Absolutely true. There is some enormously profound thing that we uncover in the course of our spiritual lives, that we are graced with this, I am different, but I am the same. As we often experience it, I've noticed in my own kind of being forced to let go of some of my various certainties along the line of living this life. There's this dream quality. There's this mysterious area in which life often becomes something where it's not quite, yes, indeed, we are in a causal universe, but there's so many causes and there's so many consequences that if we let go of our certainties about it, it begins to be a little fuzzy around the edges, and so it becomes a little magical, it becomes a little dreamlike. And I think a lot of us, as we age into this practice, we move kind of more and more into the Sambhogakaya realm, into this thing. When we move past, when we absolutely bow to and honor cause and effect, but we live into this way, open-hearted and living it, it isn't just there's a jail sentence. It is instead some astonishing gift that the universe has given to us. This is why singing and dancing are the voice of the law. This presents in this strange and wonderful way. So, the mini Dharma talk at the end of the story. Was that enough, I hope? Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
Thank you so much for the lovely story and the talk. It's been a pleasure. I'd really love to hear you talk a little bit more about your journey into Zen and your spiritual path.
Sure. Love to talk about myself. I'll try to be as concise as I'm capable of. When I came of age in the late 1960s in the San Francisco Bay Area, after I decided the psychedelics were probably not going to save the world, people kept saying, well, there's this amazing guy over in San Francisco at the Japanese Buddhist temple, and I thought, sure, why not? And I ended up going and learning how to practice at the Bush Street Zen Center, and began to, sit in at near the Berkeley Zendo, as it was called in those days, but even then, it was already kind of a going concern, and I was young and foolish and was very much peripheral. But I got it into my head that if I ordained, everything would be fixed. And it turned out San Francisco Zen Center had expectations, but an English teacher kind of blew into town. Her name was Hoan Giokinnett. And she had just come from Japan. She had a charter to go to London and start a Zen center. And you can say a lot of things about Kennett Roshi, but one that's absolutely clear is that she was really smart. And she was staying at the Zen Center, and she looked at California, she thought about London, and she moved into a flat on Potrero Hill and said she was receiving. And I was the first person at her door. Now, there's a guy named Josh Barron who claims he was the first person. Yeah. But don't pay attention to him. I was the first person. And so I was with her for about 3 years, following a fairly straight-ahead Soto program. It was cultish, it had its shadows. I brought my own problems into that. I was moved up real fast through the ordination things, and in 3 years, at the age of 22, I received Denbo transmission, and I knew there was something wrong, and so I left. I had a period of exploration, and then finally it all came together for me after about 7-8 years into kind of a shared practice. On the one hand, I found a community in the Unitarian Universalist world. It was very light on theology, very deep on social commitment and social justice, and I really, really loved the UU world, and also had a deep nod to Western culture, and especially to the intellectual and spiritual traditions of America through the Transcendentalists and other things. And I found a householder teacher, a Kuoan teacher, John Tarrant, who's a bit of a rogue, as some of you may know, and I have a humorous anecdote that I will not tell here about my, bowing to him and becoming a student of his. And however, what I did find for myself was this woven path where I had a committed 20-year training program with him, studying Kuoan practice, Kuoan introspection as the primary discipline, which for me was very much and always was rooted in the monastic formation that I was gifted with at the some years before. And between those two things, I was a UU minister. I became a UU minister. Actually, I had dropped out of high school way back when, which led, as I was going on my way to being a monastic. My wife, she had dropped out of college to join the revolution. This is a couple of revolutions back. This is about the Vietnam War. And she had become, she was a draft counselor, and when she left, she became a typesetter. And I made my living as working in used in antiquarian bookshops. And we had arrived, we were in our late 30s. I was getting kind of seriously engaged in the Zen practice, but we both knew we needed, Jen was in a dying trade, and I could get a $7 an hour job anywhere in the country. And we embarked on this thing where we put each other through school, and so I became a Unitarian minister. Jan became a librarian, the one thing I regret out of all of that was that UU world as a minister is kind of itinerant, and so I moved 4 times in my we moved 4 times in our professional lives, and there were consequences to that I have regrets about, but it was a good life. I enjoyed it, and one of the pleasures is that when it was in my Dharma to write, I was able to do that. The UU world allowed me enough space, even though being a minister is a 24/7 deal, but it's got a lot of spongy qualities to it. And so there was a period where I wrote a book every three years, hence 6. There's a 7th coming out next year, but we will not talk about that. That's this one. Was that enough of a
Absolutely,
of a story?
thank you.
Yeah. We all have these. I bet you every one of us can twist and polish and ignore and create a very nice blurb for the back of a book, if you want it. I did assist a crab fisherman in Key West at one point. I've always wanted to figure out how to drop that into the back blurb of a.
Thank you very much, James.
Were you hoping to say something? Or are you just standing?
Actually, Q&A.
Just stretch. Very good, yeah.
Q&A part is
Smart person.
Q&A part is over.
Q&A part is over, and I forgot there was something I was supposed to do at this point, but. Vowed freedom. Delusions are inexhaustible.